I've reviewed hundreds of eBay stores right here on this channel from viewers like you who complain about slow sales. And in fact, I've stopped reviewing them because 99% of them were making the exact same mistakes. 3 of them actually. So today I'm going to walk you through each one of those mistakes and how to stop making them. If you're experiencing slow sales on eBay, odds are this is why. Hello and welcome back to my weekly show where I talk about the ups and downs and in-betweens of selling on eBay. I've got another packed week for you. I hit up some garage sales this past weekend, so we'll talk through that. We'll run through my numbers for the week, and of course we'll talk through the top 10 sales. But first, let's jump back into those 3 mistakes that sellers are so often making. All right, the first mistake here, they price too high. So the truth is, pricing on eBay is really hard. I'm not going to get into every detail on why that is right now because I already made a separate video called the eBay pricing problem that breaks all of that down. But the bottom line is it can be really hard to accurately price your items on eBay. So it's no surprise to find that this is so difficult for so many sellers. Now, eBay will try to help you price your items with those little suggestions you see when listing, and most of the time they're just flat out wrong and you should ignore them. Instead, you're going to need to do some research here. Your goal is to price competitively. That means not the highest, because if you're the most expensive, your items are just going to sit. And also not the lowest, because then you're just leaving money on the table. But most sellers price too high, and I get it, we all think our inventory is special. We want to squeeze every dollar we can out of it. But you have to set emotions aside and price your items based on market data, not what you wish it was worth. Here's what I do. First, I check active comps by running a search on eBay. But before you even look at those results, make sure you don't use eBay's default best match sorting when looking through search results. You want to keep in mind here that eBay's search is designed to get buyers to buy things, not assist sellers in the research process. So the default sorting gives you a weird mix of listings that are only kind of relevant to what you searched for. And your goal here when researching is to produce a list of results that exactly match what you're researching, which is easier said than done. So to help with this, change the default sort to price, lowest to highest, then highest to lowest, so that you can see the full range. This also removes the somewhat irrelevant suggested listings that eBay gives you thinking you're a buyer. And then I check sold comps. This is the important part because what an item actually sells for is usually less than what it's listed for. Because again, a lot of sellers are overpricing their stuff, which can artificially inflate the active market value. You want to sort these sold listings by price as well, with low to high and high to low, so that you understand the price range like you did with active listings. If there's a gap between the ranges you see for actives and solds like there usually is, I tend to lean towards sold prices. I'll usually land somewhere in the middle to high end of the range. So if things are selling between $50 and $60, I'll usually price it around $55 to $60. This gives me enough room to send out offers later and still stay within the market range and protect my margins. Sometimes the active listings are more important though. For example, for items with a really good sell-through rate, there may only be a few active competing listings, and then it might make more sense to focus on aligning your pricing to the active market versus sold. This is because the buyer's options are more limited. For example, if there are 0 competitive active listings and 200 sold, it sort of doesn't matter what they sold for. You're the only seller out there, so you can almost command any price you want within reason. Another thing to keep in mind here is when I think about pricing, I consider the all-in price that includes what an item sells for plus how much the buyer is charged in shipping. So when I say something sells for $50, that could mean $50 with free shipping or $40 with $10 in shipping. It doesn't really matter how you slice it, the market value for that item is $50. I also rarely use the product research function on eBay. Now this was built specifically to help sellers research and price their items, but I find the interface both on desktop and mobile too clunky compared to regular eBay site search. It takes a lot longer to find the information I'm looking for compared to regular site search. I do occasionally check it if I can't find much information on an item in regular site search or if I'm selling seasonal items that are out of season. This is because product research data goes back 3 years for sold data, while regular site search only goes back 90 days. But here's the trap you want to avoid. Don't spend too much time trying to find the perfect price. There just isn't one. You want to time box this part of the listing process, or else you could spend all day doing it. I can usually land on a price in under 30 seconds for almost anything I'm selling, and you should strive to do the same. One thing that helps here is site search shortcuts. This is a browser trick I've got set up so that I can type E plus my keyword into the browser, and it pulls up the results of eBay's active listings with all of my preferred filters. And typing ES does the same thing for sold listings. So I can type E Lego Star Wars or ES Lego Star Wars and get exactly what I need instantly without having to mess with a bunch of filters or sort options. I also have PR set up to search product research. I'll leave a link in the description below that shows you how to set those up across all major browsers. Bottom line here, pricing isn't personal. Your inventory probably isn't worth what you think it is. Let the data decide. All right, the second mistake here is that they don't understand supply versus demand. This one's just as bad as pricing too high. A lot of sellers list items on eBay without really understanding how supply and demand and sell-through rate actually work. So they list and then they wait, and when nothing sells, they go on Facebook or Reddit and complain about how eBay is dead. 9 times out of 10, the real problem is that they're selling low-demand items with a ton of competition at prices that are way too high, so of course they're not making sales. Supply and demand works a bit differently on eBay. Let's break it down. Supply is how many of a specific item are currently listed on eBay. As a seller, that's your competition. Demand is basically how many of those same items have actually sold, and it represents how many potential buyers might be out there willing to buy your item. You can check both with the same search methods we talked about earlier during the section on pricing. Look the item up, note how many active listings there are, then filter by sold items and see how many have sold. Let's say you search for a board game. You see 45 listed, and then you check solds and see that 45 have sold. Because eBay's search history goes back 90 days for sold items, that tells you that one of these board games is selling roughly every 2 days. With 45 other sellers selling the exact same thing, that means yours could take up to 3 months to sell, assuming demand doesn't drop and nobody else lists another copy. Now compare that to something like a decorative plate with 862 listings and only 22 sold. That one's a red flag. Yeah, 22 people have bought one, but with 862 available, at that rate, it would take almost 10 years to sell through the current supply. That's not good. Now, a lot of reselling YouTubers like to provide you with a complicated formula to calculate sell-through rate. I used to be one of those YouTubers as well, but my strategy on this has changed over time. The data that eBay provides here is ultimately too messy and too inconsistent for an exact formula to be used, and it's just not necessary anyway. Instead, learn to get a feel for the sell-through rate. Are there a ton listed and barely any sold? You may want to skip that. Not many listed and a lot sold? That's probably worth picking up. And with practice, this becomes second nature. And this is about the only time I'm going to tell you to rely on feelings instead of math in your business. Also keep in mind that sell-through rate is personal. If you've got a garage full of shelves, maybe you're fine holding on to inventory for 6 months before it sells. If you're working out of your bedroom, your threshold for turnaround may only be 2 weeks or so. For me, I don't mind holding on to stuff for a long time. I've got a big basement with a lot of room in there, so I don't mind a sell-through rate that's lower than someone else may mind. And the market value matters too. I might be more willing to pick up a slower moving item if the return is going to be higher, or pick up a less valuable item if I know it'll sell super quickly. So before you complain about slow sales, check your own store. What's the demand of the stuff you're listing? What's the competition look like? This is the foundation of a working reselling business, so make sure you understand these concepts and use them every day. All right, mistake number 3, they are inconsistent. Almost anything is possible with a little tenacity. The one thing that every successful business has in common is that they got there through consistent effort compounded over time. This includes reselling. Nothing happens overnight, and that's especially true on eBay. And a lot of sellers treat eBay like a hobby. They list when they feel like it, they ship when they remember, they go sourcing when it's convenient, and if that's your goal, if this is just a casual side project, that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want consistent revenue, if you want to actually grow this into something real, you have to treat it more than just a hobby. You need consistency. So many times when I would review a seller's store, I would see obvious signs of inconsistency, like their most recently listed item was weeks ago. You need to list every day, even if it's just a few items. So that means you need to be sourcing regularly. You need to ship on time. This is not about hustle culture or grinding 24/7. It's about stability and rhythm and structure. Businesses don't run on moods, they run on systems. And the thing is, consistency compounds. I'm able to sell as much as I sell with a relatively small amount of effort because I've built this business up consistently over many years. I just posted a video last week that walks through my own daily checklist, the handful of things I do every single day to keep my reselling engine running. It's not complicated or intense, it's just consistent and it works. So if your sales feel up and down, if your motivation comes in waves, that's where you want to start. Because if you can stay consistent, everything else gets easier. The bottom line here is, if you start sourcing items that have proven demand, if you price them competitively, and you build more consistency into your routines, I promise you that sales will follow. All right, let's move on. I did hit up some garage sales this past weekend. It was Memorial Day weekend and it was raining, so the garage sales were limited, but I found a few things. Let's check it out. All right, it's Saturday and I picked up a few things at garage sales this weekend. Starting off with this PlayStation 3. This thing is super clean. It has the controller, Has the power cable, has the manuals there. I need to test it, but I don't think I've ever seen a PS3 this clean from a garage sale. I paid $40, which is a decent amount, but again, it'll sell for probably 100 to 115, I would say, is my guess. Lower margins than my normal pickups and lower ROI, but it'll be a decent return and it'll sell super quickly. It'll probably sell by the time I publish my Monday video. It'll probably be on my sold list, so we'll see. But yeah, this was a pretty good pickup at $40. Also, I saw a viewer at this garage sale. Pat, thanks for saying hi. I also got several Pampered Chef pieces here. Y'all know I like to pick up Pampered Chef pieces, especially these stoneware. These are all the Family Heritage Made in the USA stoneware pieces. They might be new, but I'll probably still sell them as used because I can't quite tell if they're new or not. This is the $13.95 mini baker. This thing, yeah, it's probably used. There's some markings on it there, but I'll probably sell this guy for $30 to $40, I would say, on this one. This is a deep dish pie plate. Again, pretty good condition. Almost looks brand new, but I'll probably still sell it as used. This thing should go for right around the same, probably $35, $40, something like that. Get this Kindle out of the way. Talk about that in a second. And then this is a rectangular baker. This is probably worth about $50, even in this condition. Having some wear on there usually doesn't hurt it too much. Obviously, if it was new, it'd be better, but having some wear on it is not too bad. This will still sell for $40 to $50. Also got this Disney snow globe. This thing's huge, and it's only $5, if you can believe that. So sell-through rate is not great, but you'll see I'll flash some comps up on the screen. Pretty impressive comps for this guy here. So I think it's from the 90s. This Aladdin magic carpet. It's a whole new world snow globe is what it's called. It comes from the Disney store. So at $5, it was a no-brainer. Also got an older Kindle in the case here. Let me just open it up. You can see I paid $5 for it. This thing, I need to plug it in and test it, make sure it works, but it should go for probably around $40 is my guess. I paid $5. Should be a quick seller. I also got this vintage Lacoste jacket here. It has some stains on it there. I'm gonna need to see if that's gonna come out. I'll probably just put it in the wash and see if it comes out. But this is surprisingly good comps on this. This is a vintage piece, and it'll probably go for $50 to $75, assuming I can get all of those stains out of it. But yeah, pretty good pickup. This I didn't get at a garage sale, but wanted to talk about it anyway. These are feet for a TV. So I mounted my parents' TV on the wall this past weekend, and I just took these home. They were going to throw them away, but it's just, when you're a reseller, you're sort of always keeping an eye out for things that are going to be worth reselling. And these replacement feet for TVs can do pretty well. I saved the screws there, as you can see. I'm not going to make a ton of money, but I'll make $20 on this probably, and something that would have been thrown away otherwise. So happy to make the extra money and keep something out of the landfill. But that was my pickup for garage sales this weekend. Not a ton, but a decent amount of profit. Oh, I also got this Nelson branded yellow tractor sprinkler. This thing is super heavy. It's cast iron. It should sell for anywhere between, I'd say, $75 and $100. It's kind of heavy, kind of a pain in the butt to ship, but this is a pretty good pickup regardless. All right, let's jump into my sales for the week. It looks like I had a gross sale amount of $758 and a net sale amount of $366. So that's a pretty slow week for me. It is below my average. I try to get right around $600 in net so that I can hit my yearly goal of $30,000 in net. But that's the thing with averages. Sometimes there's going to be weeks that are slow. Sometimes there's going to be weeks that are busy. This just happened to be a slow week for me, and it was a pretty slow week. Look at that. Just like almost every day was just like pennies, $58 gross, $70 gross, a little bit of a bump to $153, back down to $60 gross. Had a big day on Saturday with $327 and nothing on Sunday. Look at that, a big fat zero. My average gross per sale for the week was just under $33. My average net per sale was $15.93, and my net profit margin was 48%. All of those are below my average, along with my gross and net sales total. Most of my net return is coming from garage sales, which makes sense. That's where I'm sourcing mostly this time of the year. I've spent $87 on new inventory over the past 7 days. My cost of goods that sold was $101. Marketplace fees were at $118 and shipping labels at $172. I got 30 new listings here and 24 sales. So that 30 listings is 5 under my goal. I try to get 35 per week or 5 per day. So didn't quite hit my goal there, but look at that, 524 on Saturday. Did have 11 new listings, and that was also my biggest day. So you tend to see that when you're tracking your data as a correlation between the amount that you're listing and the amount that you're selling, just like that. Not every time, but it's not uncommon for me to see that My average time to list was 11 days. That's just the amount of time between acquiring the items that I listed and actually listing them. You want that number to be as low as possible. Otherwise, the higher it is, it just means you're building a death pile. My average time to sell was 3 months. That just means the time between listing and selling. And my average lifetime average is right around 3 months. So that all looks normal. But my ROI was quite a bit lower than it is normally. I usually sit around 600% lifetime average, and this was 353. So across the board, just not a good week on eBay. How about you? Did you all experience a slow week on eBay as well? All right, let's jump into my top 10 sales. Starting at number 10 here, we've got a set of 2 glass bake blue onion flower coffee mugs. These took a long time to sell. I've had them since June of 2023, so that is just under 2 years. And I only made a net return of $6.95. Well, why am I showing you this one? Look at this. This is just, again, another hard evidence here of ending and relisting and the power of that. I had listed this back, the last time this thing had been relisted was December 30th, 2023. I had Flipwise auto end and relist it on April 30th, and then it sold about 2.5 weeks later. And so this practice of ending and relisting, I'm having all sorts of weird old items sell from my inventory that hadn't been relisted in a while. So really happy with this automatic ending and relisting. It's leading to a lot more sales. I'm curious, have you turned this feature on? Have you been getting a lot of your older items to sell because of it? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear. Coming in at number 9, a pair of Mountain Hardwear 34 by 34 canvas hiking pants. These I've had for about 3 months. I picked them up at a Salvation Army for $4. They sold most recently May 24th for $24.98. That's $17.99 plus $6.99 in shipping. The net return on this sale was $9.03. Not all that great. I called this one out because it was a return. You know, I did sell this back for basically the same amount. Looks like a little bit less. I took an offer back on April 2nd, and then the buyer opened up a return because they didn't fit. They sent them back. I did purchase that return label for them because I have a free return policy. They were relisted on May 22nd and then sold 2 days later again. The reason I'm bringing this up is because, look, nobody wants returns. I hate getting returns. Don't get me wrong there. The reason I'm calling it out is because they're just not that big of a deal. So many times you can resell what gets returned, and you just don't end up losing any money. You end up making less than you otherwise would have. And you can see here, this net return on the left under item details does factor in all of the selling costs, including returning shipping. And you can see my total net return here after considering the return and the return shipping label was $3.44. So I didn't lose money. I made $3.44. Obviously, I made less than I would have made had it not gotten returned, but it did get returned, and it's just not a big deal. Coming in at number 8, this vintage Hallmark tin recipe box. This was in last week's video, I think. This is the one that had that really disgusting recipe in it that I read at the end of last week's video. Has anyone made that? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to know. Anyway, this thing sold in 5 days, so it was a pretty quick sale for $19.98. That's $12.99 plus $6.99 in shipping. The net return there was $10.36. Just a quick flip there. Only cost 25 cents. These things sell pretty well, obviously, and so that just wanted to call that out as something to keep an eye out for. It's not going to make you a millionaire, but these little sales add up for sure. Coming in at number 7 is this Starbucks mug. I like selling coffee mugs. They're not going to make me a ton of money. It is just a category that I personally like to sell, even though I don't make a ton of money on them. This one I only made $11.55, but look at that. It only took a day to sell. That's $26.98 was the total sale price, and picked it up at a garage sale for $2. So mugs still sell, even Starbucks mugs. This, years ago, Starbucks mugs used to be super crazy. I can't remember. I sold like a Tampa Bay, Florida Starbucks mug back in probably 2019 for almost $400. I sold it to someone in Taiwan. So back in the day, many, many years ago, Starbucks mugs used to be highly sought after, highly collectible, and they still are to a degree, but just not as much. But even, within the last few years, I'll flash one up on the screen. I think I've sold, well, actually, I can just look at it right here. I know that I sold like a J. Edgar Hoover FBI building mug. Let's see what the most is that I have data for. $130, yeah. So this J. Edgar Hoover one, this Starbucks mug I sold for $159. That was back in 2023. Net return of $130. I got it at a Salvation Army. What else do we have here? Starbucks London. I got this one at a St. Vincent de Paul for $2, and it sold for $50. There's a rainbow tumbler that was pretty old. I don't have a photo there. Here's a Germany one. Usually like the place mugs like this with weird locations tend to do pretty well. This one went for $40. I paid $1 at the Goodwill bins. So yeah, Starbucks mugs definitely sell. Just check your comps. Not all of them sell. Coming in at number 6, you just saw this on the garage sale video, this Amazon Kindle. This is a third gen with Wi-Fi. I did pay $5 at a garage sale, which, it's a decent cost, I guess, but these Kindles end up being worth a little bit more than most people think. And so this thing new probably cost like $100 or maybe $150, and it's pretty old. And it sold for $36.98, and it only took 3 hours to sell. So the net return on this one was $19.57. You often just have to keep them plugged in for a long time before they eventually cycle on. Something to do with how the battery works. But yeah, this one is a decent little sell. Anytime I see these older Kindles, I pick them up because they still do sell. Coming in at number 5 is this Kohler heightened elevated quiet close toilet seat. This is actually not a part of my big Kohler bulk buy. I got this at a garage sale for $10 last weekend, I think, and it sold for $46.98. That's $39.99 plus $6.99 in shipping. The net return is $20.24. The reason I wanted to call this out, I know that y'all have experienced this as well. It's a really interesting phenomenon that I'd love to do some more research on, but I got a message from a buyer on one of these, and they asked, like, hey, does it come with all of the pieces to mount it? I responded, yes, it comes with the pieces to mount it. Then they sent me a lowball offer over text, and I just said, no, sorry. And then 2 minutes later, it sold. And in my head, I was like, oh, that person just was okay with the price, even though they asked for less. And I said no, but I went and looked, and it was a different buyer. And so I know this happens occasionally where you're getting messages from people on an item and it sells to another person. It's just a really strange phenomenon. And so I don't know if messages going back and forth on an item causes that item to appear higher up in search, for example, for a specific time period. That could be what's going on. It could be that, for whatever reason, your store at that moment is getting a higher attention. And I don't know. I don't know exactly what's going on, but I know y'all have experienced that before. It's just a really weird phenomenon when you get a message from somebody and then it sells to somebody else at full price. Just very, very interesting. All right, coming to number 4 here is this lampe bergère. Is that how you pronounce that? Bergère? I don't know French, but anyway, this is it comes with a little thing of oil, and you pour the oil into this little lamp, I'll call it. I don't know. It's not a lamp. I don't know why they call it lamps. It's not like lighting anything up. Anyway, it's an old school like Glade plug-in, you light this thing on fire, you let the fire burn out or you blow it out. And then it has this rope in here that sits in the fragranced oil. And then the scent permeates throughout your house in a very nice way. But anyway, this thing, I don't even know where I got this. A garage sale. It was like 3 weeks ago. Yeah, $5. It was brand new in the package. It sold for $49.98 in 22 days. And my net return was $27.63. So these lampe bergères, they can do really well. Sometimes some of them have like really fancy designs. This was just a kind of a normal one. Nothing super special about it, but it sold pretty quickly. All right, number 3 here is this Pfister. Am I saying that right? Pfister Tenet. This is a wall-mounted towel ring. I sold it for $49 in 2 months. This did come from my recent bulk buy of fixtures, Kohler, Delta, other brands like that. My net return was $29.79. Let's take a look and see how this bulk buy is doing. I'm getting almost done listing all this stuff. Everything that's left from this palette of fixtures are things that I'm just not sure are 100% complete. And some of these just take a long time to tell whether you have all of the different pieces. And, I'm trying to figure out, do I want to spend the time going through those, or do I just want to donate them? I've already made a ton of money, and I just don't know that I want to invest all of the time into checking out whether all of these are complete. And so I may list a few more. One interesting thing is on purchase locations here on Flipwise, we did put a new total active list value. So I can see of the remaining things that are listed, 106 products has a list value of, $7,500 almost. And so knowing that I have, on average 50 to 60% margins, I probably have $3,500 of net value left in this buy. And so with a total net of $2,100, that means I'll end up with about $6,000 to $7,000 of net. And so before I was guessing on this, I was just like, I think I might have $8,000 or $9,000 in net left. But now with this total active list value feature on the purchase locations, I can tell exactly how much left is listed. And so it's a really nice feature to know kind of what to expect out of your bulk buys and how much room there is left to make money based on what's still actively listed. So that's been very helpful. All right, coming in at number 2 are these vintage Scream masks. Y'all remember many months ago, back around October. I bought a Scream mask that was one of the original ones and worth a lot of money. It sold for like $550. And so I was at garage sales a few weekends ago and I saw these two sitting there and I was very excited thinking, oh my gosh, did I just find another $500 mask? Turns out this was not as vintage as the other one. This was a reprint, but there was two and it still sold, in 7 days for $56.98. So it's not nothing. And what did I pay? I paid 50 cents each, so $1 total for these two. The net return was $39.97. I find that Halloween stuff obviously sells more frequently around October and September, but it still sells year round. And I was happy to see this one out the door for a price that I thought was pretty high. I priced it up in the mid to high end of the range, and it sold at full price, within 7 days. So that was a nice surprise. All right, that leaves us with number one here. This looks familiar. We just talked about this in the garage sale video, this Sony PlayStation Slim. This thing, again, I did pay up $40 at a garage sale, but it was one of the cleanest PS3s I've seen. So many times people just don't take great care of these things, but this was just like pristine. Always a good sign when you can see that they have the original booklets there. Usually just means they might take better care of their equipment if they're holding on to the packaging or holding on to, the registration or the booklets. And so that was a very good sign. And, this is lower margins than I normally have. My net profit margin was 42%. My ROI is 120, which are, not saying those are bad. Those are good margins, good ROI, but they're well below my average. My average margin's like 55 to 60. My average ROI is about 600%. This is significantly lower, but I knew it was going to sell very quickly. I would not invest $40, to make $48 if it was going to take a year to sell, but I just knew that this thing was going to sell very, very quickly, and it did. 3 hours for $114.98. The net return, $48.14 on this Sony PlayStation 3. All right, lights out. How are y'all doing? Did y'all have a slow week this week on eBay? I think, Memorial Day, I think is just maybe screwing up with eBay sales. I should go back and look. I didn't really look at what Memorial Day did for me last year, but either way, there's going to be ups and downs. I just don't sweat it when there are slow weeks like this. So if you had a slow week, hopefully you're not sweating it either. One thing I wanted to call out, do y'all watch Cha-Ching King Scott? He's an eBay seller. He's got a YouTube channel. Really great guy. He's in the hospital and he's sick right now. And so I was thinking what would be really nice is if we just go over to his channel and leave some fun and friendly and heartwarming comments on his videos. Hope, maybe wish him well, that he gets better soon. Just was sad to see that he was in the hospital and not feeling well. So I'm really wishing him a speedy recovery, and maybe we can make his day feel a little bit better by dropping some comments onto his channel. I'll leave a link in the description below if you want to do that. All right. Thanks so much, y'all. We will see you next week.